The book of James is one of my favorite books in all the Bible. I love how James just doesn't pull any punches. He goes straight to the point. He doesn't beat around the bush. He just puts the cookies on the bottom shelf so all of us can understand it. And it's no different here in James chapter 2. James chapter 2 is one of the most controversial chapters in this book. And it causes a lot of people to scratch their heads and say, what does it mean when he says faith without works is dead? That's the issue we're tackling here today and this week, and I hope this will be a blessing to you. Last time we saw in verses 14 through 17, beware of faithless works. Today in verse 18 through 20, we're talking about beware of workless faith. May sound the same, but really they're different, and we got to make sure that we pair together these two wonderful things, faith and works. They must be put together. This dynamic duo, when working together, is unstoppable. Faith without works is dead, and faith with works is life. Here in James chapter number 2, I want to read verses 18, 19, and 20. It says in verse 18, Yea, a man may say, Thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. Verse 19, Thou believest that there is one God. Thou doest well. The devils also believe and tremble. But wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? Internal faith must be paired with external works, and when put together, they are unstoppable. Faith and works were made for each other, much like a glove and a hand were made for each other. Just the glove all by itself is really worthless and has no power, cannot accomplish anything. But when a hand comes in a glove, then the glove is animated and can accomplish much, and much more than keeping a hand warm. The hand can work with the glove and do things that it can't do. If one is working with things that are really hot, like in a blacksmith shop, that person would wear gloves, and it enables the person to do what they could not do with just a hand alone. Faith without works is dead. They need to be coupled together, much like a glove and a hand. Not very able here. I mean, you could challenge your enemy to a duel, but still, you got to have the hand to even do that. You need to put them together. They were meant to be put together. That which is on the inside ought to be demonstrated on the outside, and it's very important. Over in 1 Samuel 16:7, Samuel gives us a great verse that really gives us a lot of insight on this issue. He's over there and he's looking for the next king of Israel. Samuel the prophet's got all the brothers of David lined up. David's still out in the sheepfold at this moment, and he's looking at him, and he sees one of the brothers, probably Eliab, and he says, wow, this guy is handsome. This guy is tall. He looks like a king. Maybe I should anoint him. And God steps in and says something very interesting. He says, Samuel, don't look on the height of his stature, on his countenance. It's not about how he looks, for the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. And that was the thing that allowed God to choose David. He was looking for a man with the right heart. And it also shows us this, that I as a man cannot see your faith unless you show it to me. God can see faith. I cannot look into somebody's heart and say, boy, you got about 10 pounds of faith in there, and you over there, you got about 8. Can't do that. God can see faith without seeing works, but I can't. And we must demonstrate our faith so other people can see it. Not just say it, but see it. And it goes on in verse number 19. And he says, the devils have faith, and they prove their faith with works. What do you think the works are in verse 19 that prove the devil's faith? Now, when I say the devils have faith, I don't mean they have saving faith. But there is something that will take place that they believe will, and that is the day of judgment. When they see God and hear the name of God, they show their faith in the coming judgment by doing one thing, and that is trembling. Read the Gospels. Every time Jesus and a demon interacted, the demon was scared of the Lord, saying, are you come to judge me now? And literally begged many times for Jesus to have mercy upon them, because they had a faith, not a saving faith, but a faith that one day they will be judged. Unfortunately, devils prove their faith more than Christians do sometimes. We as Christians don't tremble. We don't move with fear and knowing that there's judgment coming for us as well. Not a judgment of the great white throne, but a judgment that we will stand before God, before the judgment seat of Christ, and receive rewards and lack of rewards based upon the things that we do in this body. You can read about that in 1 Corinthians chapter number 2. We need to make sure that our faith has works. The devils believe and also tremble. And then he asks one more question here that I think is very helpful in verse number 20. And he says, "Thou, O vain man, empty man, wilt thou know that faith without works is dead?" And this is where it gets a little confusing for people. What does that mean, faith without works is dead? Does that mean I'm no longer a Christian? Does that mean if I'm not showing my faith that I have lost my salvation? Not necessarily. Here I have a car to illustrate and get you to think. Pretend you have a car that you drive, a real car, and you drove and wrecked your car, boom, into a wall at 60 miles an hour. You were safely evacuated after the fact. No harm was done to you, but all the harm came to your car. If you took a car and you rammed it into a wall at 60 miles an hour, would that car continue to work properly? And the answer to that question is no, it wouldn't. It would not work properly. In fact, part of the car may be all over the place. I mean, you could see engine parts and hood parts and all sorts of light parts all over the place, because when you crash a car into a wall at 60 miles an hour, it really stops the car from working. Well, let me ask you this question. If you wreck a car into a wall at 60 miles an hour, does it turn into a van? Does it turn into a truck? Does it turn into a moped? No, it doesn't. Is it still a car? Yeah, it's still a car. Just because it's not working doesn't mean it's not what it intentionally was made to be, or it's not what it was before it wrecked into the wall. And some people think, oh, boom, my faith is not working, I'm no longer a Christian. That's not what he's saying here. He's saying your faith is there, but it's not running. The car is a car, but the engine needs some repair. There are all sorts of people in the Bible who had faith, but their faith was dead because they weren't showing their works. When Jonah got on that boat, he had faith, but his faith was dead. And God woke him up with a whale. When David stood on his balcony and saw Bathsheba, his faith was dead. And God needed to wake him up with Nathan the prophet. When Peter was right there in that court and they were asking him, "Are you his disciple?" He denied 3 times. His faith was dead, and God needed to wake him up. There are times in our life, Christians, when our faith isn't working properly. It's not that you're not a Christian. You just need to go into God's shop and let him fix you up. Is your faith working? Is your faith running well? And going from on the side of the road broke down to running again is what God desires for everybody. Keep your faith working. That's what you're meant to do. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day. God bless you.